Chapter 1. The Human Stabilizer. Product Manager Gu Nan was the silent, beating heart of Stratos Tech. While the open-plan office churned with the chaotic energy of brilliant, over-caffeinated developers, aggressive sales alphas, and visionary manic founders, Gu Nan's corner was an oasis of calm. He never raised his voice. He never argued. He simply steered. When a lead engineer, a dominant alpha with a temper as short as his code, would start ranting about unrealistic deadlines, Gu Nan would listen, nod, and say, "I hear the bottleneck. Let's map the critical path." His voice, a quiet baritone, didn't cut through the noise, it absorbed it. Meetings that started as shouting matches ended with actionable items. He was the company's secret weapon, the human stabilizer. His secret? Gu Nan was an unregistered, latent guide. In a world where the guide/sentinel dynamic had evolved from military to corporate, registered guides were prized assets. Human mood regulators deployed to manage high-strung, super-perceptive sentinel executives. They wore their status openly, their calibrated empathic fields a tool for shareholder value. Gu Nan had no interest in being a tool. His ability was subtle, instinctive. He didn't project emotions. He absorbed and neutralized them, creating a pocket of psychic quiet. He'd spent years perfecting the art of self-suppression, wearing it like his uniform of gray sweaters and noise-canceling headphones. His silent mode wasn't a personality quirk. It was a fortress. The fortress developed its first crack with the arrival of He Rue. He Rue was a back-end engineering prodigy, headhunted at great cost. He was also, as the HR report delicately put it, a high-variance asset, an unregistered alpha with clear, volatile, sentinel-like traits. Hyperfocus that could last 48 hours, an almost painful sensitivity to sensory chaos. Open offices were as hell, and a low threshold for what he termed illogical noise. Their first meeting was a disaster. He Rue, bristling with jet lag and disdain for the user-flow nonsense, tore apart a product spec in front of the design team. His critique was razor-sharp, his delivery brutal. The room temperature seemed to drop. Gu Nan watched the designer, a sensitive beta, shrink into her seat. He felt the jagged spikes of He Rue's frustration, a psychic static that grated against his own calm. Without thinking, Gu Nan leaned forward just enough to enter He Rue's eyeline. He didn't speak. He simply exhaled, releasing a measured wave of quiet, not to soothe He Rue, but to shield the room. "The logic is valid," Gu Nan said, his voice a placid lake. The presentation was inefficient. He Rue, map the architectural dependencies you see. We'll rebuild the spec from the server out. He Rue's tirade died in his throat. He blinked, those intense, dark eyes focusing on Gu Nan with unnerving clarity. The static didn't vanish, but it shifted. The aggressive edge softened into pure, focused intensity. He grunted, snatched a tablet, and began typing furiously. The meeting ended with a new plan. As everyone filed out, He Rue lingered. He stopped by Gu Nan's desk. He said, "You didn't get defensive." "The code doesn't care about my ego," Gu Nan replied, not looking up from his screen. He Rue was silent for a beat. The noise had stopped. "When you spoke." Gu Nan's fingers stilled on the keyboard. He kept his expression neutral, glad the meeting was productive. He Rue left, but the look in his eyes, a mix of suspicion and dawning, bewildered relief, lingered in the air like a challenge. Chapter 2. The Glitch. The Project Ether launch was a company-wide pressure cooker. A flagship AI feature was buggy. The C-suite was breathing down their necks. The office was a symphony of stress, shouted stand-ups, the incessant ping of Slack, the acrid smell of burnt coffee and panic. He Rue was at the epicenter, tasked with fixing a critical database flaw. For 36 hours straight, he was a storm contained in a hoodie. Gu Nan could feel him from 3 pods away, a concentrated cyclone of frustration and hyperfocus, so potent it made other engineers jittery. The meltdown happened in the war room. A senior VP, a classic corporate alpha with no tech sense, demanded an impossible rollback. He Rue tried to explain the data corruption risk, his words coming faster, sharper, his control fraying. The VP talked over him. The room erupted into overlapping arguments. Hirue snapped. He didn't yell. He went dangerously quiet. His knuckles turned white where he gripped the table. The air grew thick, charged. Sensitive betas winced. Even other alphas felt an instinctive urge to back down. He was a sentinel on the verge of a sensory overload, his brilliant mind about to be swamped by the illogical human noise. Gunan acted on instinct. He didn't stand. He didn't raise a hand. He simply stood up from his chair, walked over to where Hirue sat vibrating with silent fury, and placed his palm flat on the table, right beside Hirue's clenched fist. It was close, but not touching, an offering of proximity. Then he spoke, not to the VP, not to the room, to Hirue. The constraint is time, not logic, Gunan said, his voice so quiet everyone else had a strain to hear. It forced a silence. The VP needs a win condition. You have a solution space. Give me the boundary parameters. I will translate. He was building a bridge. And as he spoke, he did what he'd never dared to do so deliberately. He dialed down his internal dampeners and pushed. Not a forceful calm, but a clear, clean signal of focus. He visualized a pristine, logical flowchart and projected that structured quiet directly at the maelstrom that was Hirue. The effect was instantaneous. Hirue's breath hitched. The terrifying stillness around him dissolved. His fingers unclenched. He looked from Gunan's hand on the table to his face, his eyes wide, not with anger, but with shock. The chaotic pressure in the room lifted. The VP, bewildered, shut up. Boundary parameters, Hirue repeated, his voice rough but coherent. He grabbed a marker and turned to the whiteboard. Fine. Here's the schema. The meeting continued. The crisis was averted. Gunan had become the interpreter between the chaotic human world and Hirue's pure, turbulent logic. Afterward, Gunan fled to the empty rooftop garden, his hands shaking. He'd risked exposure. He'd used his ability actively on another person. The residual echo of Hirue's turmoil, sharp, bright, and strangely compelling, still hummed in his own nerves. He didn't hear the door open. Hirue stepped out, holding 2 cans of cold green tea. He wordlessly offered one. You're a guide, Hirue stated. No question. Absolute certainty. Gunan's blood ran cold. He said nothing. Unregistered. Latent. Probably self-taught to suppress. Hirue took a sip of his tea, his gaze analytical. My cousin is a registered sentinel in finance. I know what a calibrated guide field feels like. This is like a weighted blanket, smothering. He paused, looking at Gunan. Yours is like hitting the compile button and getting 0 errors. It's quiet. Gunan finally found his voice. What do you want? Hirue considered him. I want to not feel like I'm constantly debugging the human race while my own systems are on fire. He gestured vaguely at his own head. You make the noise stop, not by muting it, by optimizing it. He wasn't threatening to report him. He was asking for help. I'm not a tool, Gunan whispered, his own long-held mantra. I'm not asking for a tool, Hirue said, his intensity softening into something more vulnerable. I'm asking for the quiet. In the humming silence of the city below, Gunan's fortress walls didn't just crack. A door swung open. Chapter 3. The Private Beta. Their partnership became a clandestine project, more secret than any proprietary code. No NDAs were signed, but the silence between them was binding. Hirue, with a programmer's logic, approached it as a systems integration issue. Your output stabilizes my processing environment, he stated one evening after the office had emptied, the only light coming from his monitor. We need to define the parameters. Triggers, duration, feedback. Gunan, who had spent a lifetime treating his ability as a shameful secret to be managed, was thrown by the clinical framing. It's not an API, Hirue. Everything is an API, Hirue countered, turning his intense gaze on him. Human emotion is just messy data. You clean it up. For me. So, they developed protocols. A subtle, non-verbal language. When the sensory onslaught of the office, the overlapping conversations, the flickering LED lights, the 100 different lunch smells, became too much, Hirue would send a ping, a deliberate, sharp exhale, or a single tap of his pen against his temple. Gunan, from across the room, would respond with a steadying push of quiet focus, like a targeted noise cancellation wave. The results were transformative. Hirue's brilliant output became consistent, not spiky. His notorious irritability smoothed into mere, tolerable bluntness. The engineering team's velocity increased by 15%. The CTO sent a congratulatory memo. Gunan, however, was draining himself. Acting as a living stabilizer for a high-powered, unregulated sentinel-like mind was exhausting. He started drinking more coffee, found himself needing true silence on his lunch breaks, hiding in a forgotten server closet with his headphones on, not playing music, just bathing in the hum of the machines. Hirue noticed. Of course he did. His perception was the problem and the gift. One Friday, after a particularly grueling week, Gunan was at his desk, trying to massage away a tension headache. A shadow fell over his keyboard. He looked up to see Hirue holding a small, ceramic pot with a single, serene jade plant. "For your desk," Hirue said, placing it beside Gunan's monitor. "Studies show interacting with green, living organisms can reduce cortisol levels in empaths by approximately 18%. He said it like he was citing a research paper, but his eyes were earnest. "And it's quiet. Like you." It was the first gift. The first acknowledgement that Gunan wasn't just a service, but a person who could be depleted. Gunan touched a cool, smooth leaf and felt something in his chest unfurl. "Thank you." Your energy output dropped 40% after 3 p.m., Hirue continued, his brow furrowed. "We need to optimize the resource allocation. You require recharge cycles." Gunan's breath caught. Hirue was including himself in the equation of Gunan's well-being. "What do you suggest?" Gunan asked, a faint, unfamiliar smile touching his lips. Hirue pulled up a chair. "Scheduled intervals. 5 minutes of focused stabilization per hour, instead of continuous low-level output." And he hesitated, uncharacteristically unsure. "A direct interface might be more efficient. Proximity reduces signal loss." "Direct interface?" Sitting closer, Hirue's ears turned faintly pink. "The data transfer is cleaner." So, Hirue moved his desk. Not next to Gunan, that would raise questions, but to the adjacent pod with a clear line of sight. Now, the ping could be a glance. The push could be a steady look held for a half-second too long. The quiet between them grew deeper, more charged. It was no longer just about managing noise. It was about sharing a wavelength. Chapter 4. The Talent Scout. The success of Project Ether drew more than just clients. It drew corporate predators. A sleek woman named Alara Vance from Vertex Solutions, Stratos Tech's biggest competitor, started appearing in the office. She was a strategic talent consultant, which everyone knew was a fancy term for corporate headhunter and intelligence gatherer. She was also, Gunan sensed immediately, a highly trained register guide. Her field was polished and powerful, like a perfume that was pleasant but left an aftertaste of control. She focused her attention on the Ether team, and her sharp eyes kept landing on Gunan and Hirue. She cornered Gunan at the espresso machine. "You have a remarkable effect on your team, Mr. Gu," she said, her smile smooth. "Especially on Hirue. His performance metrics have undergone a remarkable normalization. Our psychometric models find it fascinating." Gunan kept his own field locked down tight, a vault of neutral nothing. "He's a brilliant engineer. We just communicate clearly." "Is that what you call it?" Alara's gaze was piercing. "Communication." She lowered her voice. "Unregistered guides are a liability, Mr. Gu. A risk to themselves and others. At Vertex, we value such talents. We provide training, certification, a significant compensation package, and a worthy Sentinel partner to match your quiet strength." The offer was a threat wrapped in velvet. "Come with us voluntarily, or we might have to inform Stratos Tech about their undocumented empathic asset." "I'm not a guide," Gunan said, his voice the same calm monotone he used in budget meetings. He took his coffee and walked away, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The next day, she went for Rue. Gunan watched from his desk as she leaned over Rue's workstation, her field pulsing with persuasive, appealing energy. She was trying to guide him, to sway him. Rue's response was to physically recoil, his face a mask of disgust. "Your signal is noisy," he snapped, loud enough for others to hear. "And your logic is flawed. I'm not interested." Alara withdrew, her smile icy. She had been rejected, and she had seen Rue's clear, visceral preference for a different kind of quiet. The attack came via email. A detailed, anonymous report was sent to Stratos HR and the CTO, alleging unregulated psychic influence in the workplace by an unregistered individual, creating an unfair and potentially coercive working environment. It mentioned no names, but the description of the stabilizing effect on a high-value alpha engineer was a blueprint of Gunan and Rue. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through Gunan. This was it. Exposure. Termination. Maybe legal action. Rue stormed into the small conference room where Gunan was sitting, staring blankly at the wall. "We're leaving," Rue declared. "What?" "We resign. Today. We start our own firm." Rue's eyes were blazing, not with overload, but with pure, protective certainty. "They want to own you, to patent what you do. I won't let them." Gunan looked at him, this brilliant, unstable man who had become his anchor as much as he was Gunan's. "That's insane. We have no funding, no plan. I have savings. You have the plan." Rue knelt beside his chair, an echo of that first unconscious submission to Gunan's quiet. "You stabilize the chaos. I build in the quiet. That's our product. That's our company." It was the most illogical, reckless, and beautiful proposal Gunan had ever heard. It wasn't an offer of employment. It was an offer of partnership, of a life built not on hiding, but on the very thing he'd been muting. He looked at Rue's determined face, felt the steady, sure pulse of his focus through their nascent bond. The fear didn't vanish, but it was met, for the first time, by a surge of something louder. Possibility. "We'll need a name," Gunan said softly. Rue's answering grin was swift and bright. "I was thinking," he said, silent mode. Chapter 5. The Startup. Their resignations were a calculated shockwave. The CTO, fearing the loss of his star engineer and the secret sauce behind his stability, made a frantic counteroffer: double salaries, a private office, official consultant status for Gunan. Alara from Vertex increased the velvet glove pressure, sending a formal offer letter to Gunan's home address that mentioned regulatory compliance assistance and Sentinel pairing services in the same breath as the seven-figure signing bonus. They declined everything. Silent Mode was born not in a gleaming incubator, but in the living room of Rue's apartment, which smelled of solder, old takeout, and potential. The office was a standing desk made of stacked textbooks facing a sleek, silent workstation. The product was intangible, guided development. The concept was simple, revolutionary, and illegal by current guide/Sentinel corporate regulations. They wouldn't lease out Gunan as a calming service. Instead, they would offer a complete package. Rue's unparalleled, focused engineering prowess, enabled by Gunan's sustained, optimized calm. They would take on short-term, high-stakes projects for startups that couldn't afford a full-time Sentinel/guide pair, but were dying in the chaos of their own growth. Their first client was a fintech founder, a brilliant but manic beta whose big idea was drowning in technical debt and team burnout. The demo was their pitch. In the client's noisy, glass-walled conference room, the founder spoke in rapid, scattered paragraphs, anxiety vibrating off him. Rue listened, his body tensing as the sensory and logical noise escalated. Gunan, sitting calmly beside him, didn't say a word. He placed his palms flat on the table and breathed. It was a more deliberate version of his office trick. He visualized a cone of silence, not just around Rue, but encompassing the entire room. He absorbed the frantic energy, metabolized it, and reflected back structured clarity. The founder's speech slowed. His shoulders dropped. Hirue, who had been wound like a spring, leaned forward, his eyes sharp and clear. Your problem isn't the code, Hirue stated, his voice precise, not harsh. It's the pipeline. The data architecture is arguing with the user interface. We will rebuild the middleware. Gunan will handle your team syncs. It wasn't a request. It was a diagnosis and prescription delivered from a place of absolute, calm authority. The founder, feeling heard and understood for the first time, signed a contract on the spot. The work was grueling. Gunan was no longer just stabilizing Hirue. He was managing the emotional landscape of an entire client company, acting as an empathic scrum master, conflict resolver, and panic diffuser. He slept deeply but woke tired, his mind feeling stretched thin. Hirue noticed. He began to curate their environment with the same precision he applied to code. He installed blackout curtains and bias lighting to control visual noise. He programmed a smart diffuser to release subtle, grounding scents, sandalwood for focus, lavender for reset. He learned to make a perfect cup of tea, placing it wordlessly beside Gunan's keyboard when he sensed his energy dipping. One late night, after a successful client launch, they sat on the floor amidst pizza boxes and empty cans of energy drink. Gunan was exhausted, his shields so low he could feel the vibrant, satisfied hum of Hirue's success like warm sunlight on his skin. You're running at 23% capacity, Hirue said quietly, not looking at his tablet but at Gunan's face. The client is happy. The system works. The system is inefficient if the core component degrades. Hirue shifted closer. I have a hypothesis. The direct interface. We've only used it for my stabilization, but the transfer should be bidirectional. Gunan frowned. What are you saying? I think I can give you focus, too. Not calm. You have that. But clarity, energy, like a feedback loop of quiet. He looked uncertain, a rare expression for him. May I test the hypothesis? Gunan, too tired to be cautious, nodded. Hirue reached out slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. He didn't touch Gunan's skin, but placed his hand over Gunan's where it rested on the floor, palm up, a hair's breadth apart. Then, Hirue did what Gunan always did, he focused. But instead of pushing out chaotic data, he focused on one thing, Gunan. He remembered the clarity he felt in Gunan's presence, the peace, and he pushed that feeling back along the invisible connection between them. It wasn't empathy. It was appreciation distilled into a pure, energizing signal. Gunan gasped. It felt like cool water on a parched mind, like a system reboot. The fatigue didn't vanish, but it was compartmentalized, manageable. His thoughts, which had been fuzzy, snapped into sharp relief. Oh, he breathed. Hirue's eyes lit up with triumphant wonder. The hypothesis is correct. We're not a service and a client. We're a closed-loop system. He didn't move his hand. The space between their palms felt charged, alive. The partnership had just become a circuit, complete and self-sustaining. Chapter 6. The Raid. Silent Mode success was a quiet scandal. They were too effective, too inexplicable. The established guide registry corporations and talent agencies couldn't categorize them. Rumors spread. Were they using unlicensed neurotech? Was it a new form of corporate espionage? Alara Vance and Vertex Solutions decided if they couldn't buy Silent Mode, they would break it. The attack was two-pronged. First, a smear campaign. Anonymous posts on tech forums insinuating Hirue's genius was chemically enhanced, that Gunan was using illegal hypnotic techniques. It was baseless, but it sowed doubt. The second prong was regulatory. Vertex had deep ties to the Ethical Talent Governance Board. A formal complaint was filed, alleging Silent Mode was operating an unlicensed guide-for-hire service, a violation of corporate psychic labor laws. A raid was scheduled. The notification came via a terse email with a case number. Investigators would arrive at Hirue's apartment, their registered business address, in 48 hours to audit their operations. Panic, this time, was a cold, shared entity between them. They sat at their makeshift desks in the silent apartment, the weight of the law pressing down. We can run, Hirue said, his jaw tight. Disband. Go offline. And then what? Gunan asked, his voice steady, though his heart wasn't. Go back to hiding? You to some corporate cage, me to a lifetime of suppression. He looked around their chaotic, sacred space. This is the first time I haven't been muted. I won't go back. Hirue looked at him, a fierce pride in his eyes. Then we fight, but not with their weapons. With ours. They had 48 hours to prepare. Not to hide evidence, but to create it. To turn their defense into their ultimate product demo. When the two stern-faced investigators from the governance board arrived, they didn't find a clandestine lab. They found Hirue and Gunan seated calmly at the dining table, a single laptop open. We're here to audit your guide-related activities. The lead investigator, a beta woman with a dampening field of her own, stated. We've prepared a demonstration, Gunan said, of what silent mode truly does. Hirue pulled up a complex, real-time simulation of a crumbling server architecture for a dummy client. This system is failing. Multiple critical bugs. Team morale is at 0. The standard solution would take a registered guide 2 weeks to stabilize the team and a senior engineer 80 hours to diagnose. He nodded to Gunan. Gunan took a deep breath. This was it. He dropped every last internal shield. He didn't project calm at Hirue. He let his natural state, the deep, resonant quiet that was his core, flow freely into the room, encompassing Hirue, the investigators, the very air. The change in Hirue was instantaneous and profound. His posture became absolutely still, his eyes locking on the code with otherworldly focus. His fingers flew across the keyboard, but there was no frantic energy. It was like watching a master pianist play a concerto from memory, effortless, precise, beautiful. But Gunan didn't stop there. He turned his attention to the investigators. He didn't try to influence them. He simply let them feel the quality of the silence in the room. It wasn't oppressive or controlling. It was liberating. It was the silence of pure potential, of a mind unshackled. Hirue spoke as he worked, his voice clear and measured, explaining each fix as he made it. In 10 minutes, the simulated system was stable, optimized, with a full diagnostic report generated. He stopped typing. The room was utterly silent. The lead investigator blinked, as if waking from a dream. She looked from the flawless code on the screen to Gunan's serene face, to Hirue's alert, calm eyes. What was that? Her partner asked, his voice hushed. That, Gunan said softly, is a partnership. I'm not guiding him. He is not using me. We are interoperable. My function allows his function to operate at theoretical maximum efficiency. We are a single unit. Regulating me separately would be like regulating the left side of a brain and calling it a day. Hirue leaned forward. The current laws are written for tools and users. We are not that. We are a new class of collaborative entity. And trying to dismantle us, he said, with the absolute certainty of a proven algorithm, would be a crime against progress. The investigators left an hour later, not with fines or cease and desist orders, but with signed NDAs and dazed expressions. The official report would be buried, classified under emerging paradigm, observation recommended. They had faced the law and redefined the terms of engagement. As the door closed, the adrenaline crash hit them both. Gunan swayed on his feet. Hirue was there in an instant, guiding him to the couch. You were magnificent, Hirue murmured, his hands cupping Gunan's face, thumbs stroking his temples where a headache threatened. We were, Gunan corrected, leaning into the touch, the feedback loop of calm and clarity humming between them, stronger than ever. The war wasn't over, but they had won the battle. On their own terms, in their own silence. Chapter 7, The Critical Bug. Victory made them visible, and visibility brought a new kind of pressure. Silent mode was inundated with requests from desperate founders, from curious venture capitalists, and from a powerful, secretive source, the military's Advanced Projects Division. The offer was a contract to troubleshoot a critical, opaque system failure at a secure R&D facility. The money was astronomical. The implication was clear. This was a test for something much bigger. Hirue was intellectually seduced. A system no one can fix? It's the ultimate puzzle. Gunan felt a deep, instinctive dread. It's a trap. We're a cage. Once they see what we can do on their problems, they'll never let us go. They argued, their first real conflict. It wasn't loud. It was a cold tension that stretched their bond thin. Hirue's focus became a spiky, isolated thing. Gunan's quiet felt more like a wall than a bridge. In the strained silence, the real crisis hit. It started with a flicker in the lights. Then, a high-pitched whine from Hirue's main server rack. He was in the middle of a complex, multi-layered debugging session for a regular client, his mind deep in the code. "Hirue, something's wrong," Gunan said, his empathic senses screaming at a sudden, violent shift in the energy of the room. Not emotional, but electrical. Hirue didn't hear him. He was locked in, his sentinel-like hyper-focus a tunnel with no exit. The server whine escalated to a shriek. A power surge, raw and chaotic, spiked through the building's aging grid. To Gunan, it was a loud bang. To Hirue, whose senses were wide open and lasered onto the digital problem, it was a psychic tsunami. The surge didn't just hit the hardware. It screamed through his neural interface with the machine. Hirue cried out, a short, sharp sound of pure, sensory agony, and convulsed, his hands flying to his head. His eyes were wide, unseeing, flooded with searing, nonsensical data. The crash dump of a server mixed with the scream of electricity, the smell of ozone, the blinding flash of overloaded circuits. It was a full system crash, of the machine and of the man. Gunan acted without thought. He didn't try to project calm. Calm was irrelevant in the face of this neurological firestorm. He crossed the room and did what he had never dared. He broke the final barrier. He framed Hirue's face with his hands, his skin touching Hirue's feverish skin. He closed his eyes and didn't just open his empathic channels. He inverted them. Instead of absorbing chaos, he poured himself out. He fed his own consciousness, his quiet, his stability, his very sense of self, directly into the maelstrom that was Hirue's mind. It wasn't guidance. It was a transfusion. He felt the violent crash of data, the searing pain. He didn't fight it. He wrapped his own awareness around it, creating a container, a simulation of a clean, rebooted system. Here is quiet. Here is order. Follow my signal back. It was terrifying. He felt himself fragmenting, dissipating into the storm. He was giving too much. Then he felt it, a desperate, familiar grasp. In the chaos, Hirue's consciousness recognized his, not as a tool, but as home. He latched on, not to take, but to anchor. Slowly, painfully, the psychic storm began to abate. The feedback loop reestablished, but changed. Deeper. Their minds weren't just interfacing. They had fused at the edges to survive. When Hirue's eyes finally cleared, they were full of a shattered, awestruck terror. He was clutching Gunan's wrists, their foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. You were in the noise, Hirue rasped. You were the only pattern. You almost vanished. You anchored me, Gunan whispered, his voice raw. You pulled me back. The argument was over. The military contract was forgotten. The only thing that mattered was the shocking, terrifying intimacy of what had just happened. They hadn't just saved each other. They had become, in a moment of crisis, something almost indivisible. Hirue, trembling, pressed a kiss to Gunan's forehead, a seal, a promise, a thanks. No more closed systems, he vowed. From now on, we run the same kernel. You and me. Chapter 8. Launch. The critical bug changed everything. They declined all external contracts. The apartment office was too small, too haunted by the echo of overload. They needed a new space. Not just physical, but philosophical. They used the last of their capital to lease a small, sun-drenched loft in an old, quiet part of the city. The walls were painted a soft, calming gray. The tech was state-of-the-art, but silent. There were plants everywhere in a dedicated, quiet room, lined with soundproofing, containing only a comfortable chair and a window. They called it the stable environment. Silent mode pivoted. They were no longer a service for hire. They became pioneers. Their new product was the Symbiosis Protocol, a white paper, a manifesto, and eventually open-source software. The protocol was their lived experience codified, a set of principles and, non-empathic, tools for creating partnerships where disparate minds could interconnect without dominance or suppression. It used data visualization to map team energy, communication filters to reduce logical noise, and environmental cues to optimize for focus. It was a human-scale operating system for collaboration, inspired by the circuit they had become. The launch event wasn't in a conference hall. It was a live stream from their loft. Hirue, dressed in a simple black sweater, stood beside a large screen displaying elegant, flowing code. Gunan sat in a comfortable chair to the side, a picture of serene presence. For years, the world has seen two models, Hirue began, his voice clear and confident, grounded by the quiet field Gu and gently maintained for the stream. The dominant personality who shouts, and the guide who silences. Both are forms of control. Both are inefficient. On screen, visualizations appeared. A chaotic, spiking graph labeled Unstable Genius Output. A flat, suppressed line labeled Guided Compliance. We propose a third way. The graphs merged, not into an average, but into a beautiful, sustained, high-amplitude sine wave. The symbiosis wave, where different kinds of intelligence don't cancel each other out. They amplify each other. Where calm isn't the absence of noise, but the space where the right signal can be heard. Hirue explained the technical principles. Then, he nodded to Gunan. Gunan looked directly into the camera. For the first time, he spoke to the world not as a hidden guide, but as an equal creator. His quiet voice filled the digital space. This isn't about being a sentinel or a guide. It's about being human. We all have noise. We all have the capacity for quiet. The protocol is just a way to ask, what could you build? Who could you be if you had the right kind of silence? The stream ended. The tech world exploded. Some called it hippie nonsense. Others called it the most important human tech advancement in a decade. Inquiries flooded in, not for their labor, but for their philosophy. That night, in their new, quiet loft, they stood on the small balcony overlooking the sleepy street. The frantic ping of notifications was muted inside. Hirue stood behind Gunan, arms wrapped around him, chin resting on his head. The protocol is running, he murmured. It's just version 1, Gunan said, leaning back into his warmth, feeling the steady, focused hum of Hirue's mind against his own quiet, a perfect harmonic. We'll iterate. Hirue turned him gently, so they were face to face. The city lights reflected in his eyes. For the rest of our lives. He kissed him then, not in crisis or gratitude, but in quiet, certain partnership. It tasted of shared purpose and green tea and a future they had written themselves in a language of silence and code. Gunan kissed him back, his hands coming up to thread through Hirue's hair. In his mind, a lifetime of muted static finally, completely, resolved into a single, perfect, clear signal. The silent mode was switched off. The connection was live. Epilogue. Gunan's perspective. They say your life flashes before your eyes when you die. No one mentions what happens when you finally start to live. It doesn't flash. It unfolds. Sitting in the morning light of our loft, watching Hirue argue passionately with a holographic code schema, his hands flying, his voice a low, focused rumble. I feel the unfolding. It's in the warmth of the jade plant on my desk. Its leaves a deeper green now. It's in the quiet hum of the environmental system Hirue designed, which filters out the jarring city frequencies that used to grate at the edge of my awareness. It's in the taste of the tea he places by my elbow, perfectly steeped without my having to ask. For so long, I thought of my ability as a burden, a secret flaw to be compressed, minimized, run in the background on the lowest possible power setting. I was a device perpetually in silent mode, terrified of what might happen if I rang out. I muted my emotions to avoid influencing others. I muted my desires to avoid attracting attention. I muted my very self to survive. Hirue didn't just hear my silence. He diagnosed it. He saw a system operating at 1% efficiency and asked, What if we optimized it? The first time he knelt, it was instinct, his biology recognizing a bomb it had never known. But the choice he made after, the persistent, logical, stubborn choice to stay, to build a partnership, that was the beginning of my unmuting. Unmuting is not the same as being loud. I will never be loud, but my quiet is no longer empty. It's full. It's full of a shape of his focus, a tangible, brilliant structure I can lean against. It's full of the feedback loop we've built, where I give him clarity and he gives me energy, a sustainable exchange that feels less like draining a battery and more like photosynthesis. It's full of the profound relief of being known, not as a secret or a tool, but as an essential component in a system he values above all others. Sometimes at night, when the city's digital pulse is at its lowest, I practice. I don't practice suppression. I practice range. I'll send a gentle pulse of focused calm toward the neighbor's anxious dog and listen to the frantic yapping settle into quiet whines, then sleep. I'll sit in the park and, instead of pulling all the scattered, stressful emotions into myself, I'll try to weave them into a harmless, diffuse tapestry, a skill we're trying to incorporate into Protocol 2.0. I am learning to use my voice. Our work now is different. The symbiosis protocol is out in the world. We get letters. A teacher in a noisy classroom used our environmental principles to help a neurodivergent student focus. A bickering startup co-founder team used our communication filters, and now their arguments last 10 minutes, not 10 hours. They call it finding their stable environment. They have no idea the stable environment is two men in a loft, one who speaks in code, one who speaks in quiet, who have learned to compile each other's languages. Hirue finishes his debate with a hologram and turns to me. His hair is a mess. He has a smudge of digital ink on his cheek. He looks happy, peaceful, in his element. The consensus algorithm is inefficient, he announces, walking over. It creates psychic drag. We need a new one. He says psychic drag, with the same tone he'd use for memory leak. I love that about him. He has taken the messy, terrifying, beautiful reality of what we are and made it just another fascinating system to optimize. We'll design a new one, I say, reaching up to wipe the ink from his cheek. My fingers linger. The touch is no longer just a point of contact for empathic transfer. It's a point of connection, full stop. He catches my hand, turns his face to kiss my palm. His eyes close, and for a moment, I feel him, not his stress or his focus, but his contentment. A deep, warm, steady frequency. He sends it to me deliberately, a gift. I send back my own, a wave of quiet pride, a belonging. His eyes open, and he smiles. It's a smile no one at Stratos Tech ever saw. It's unguarded. It's for me. The system is running optimally, he says, and it's our joke, our truth, our vow. I used to think I was hiding in plain sight. Now I know I was waiting. I was a program in suspension, and Hirue was the command line that woke me up. He is my most compelling logic, my definitive proof, my permanent exception, and I am no longer silent. I am as quiet, and together, we are building a world where everyone can find theirs.